just landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO classified. UFO classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome to UFO Classified and happy Friday, my friends. I am always excited to get into chat, to see everybody here and to know that you guys are sharing information about the show. You're taking an interest in the subjects that I'm presenting because, in my opinion, they are very critical for success in this subject. Now more than ever, it is imperative that we understand our history and that we know about the sacrifice.
So we seem to have lost Erica, but while we're waiting for her to return, Barry and I will pull a coup and take over the show.
Oh, there you are.
I think, well, maybe it was a sign that I just need to, go have a margarita or something and let you boys take over.
I thought that's what you did, go and have a margarita.
She is out in the ether somewhere. I don't know if she's having issues up there where she is with the internet. So we're going to have to carry on with the boys here.
And who are those boys?
I have no idea. We just call you guys, we just call you Agent 51, Agent 52.
How about Orthon and Ramu?
That works even better. There we go. So, actually, we have Barry Greenwood and we have Jan Aldrich on. And if you guys have not heard them before, they are absolutely fantastic. And I know Eric was planning on talking about some Foo Fighters and kind of stuff that's going on, some information you guys got. So which one of you want to take it first while we get Erica back on?
Well, I can start. Foo Fighters. Essentially, a lot of people now have become familiar with the term Foo Fighters from the rock and roll group, but there's a much earlier history for that term being used, and it originated in World War II when, actually throughout the war, but most often towards the end of 1944 and half of 1945, before the war ended, pilots began reporting strange phenomena during their flights, night flight missions, bomber missions, and they saw very odd spherical-shaped objects, sometimes singly and sometimes in formation, maneuvering around their aircraft and absolutely dazzling the pilots and crew members with strange maneuvering and a very exotic appearance. And it was assumed at the time that these things might have been related to secret weapons being used by either the Nazis or the Japanese or both. And it became apparent, especially after the war, that the Japanese and the Germans as well were astonished by the phenomenon, having had it happen to their own aircraft. And they thought the Allies were responsible. So you had a mystery to both sides. And the brass was certainly astonished by the phenomenon, and they launched inquiries into it, trying to find out what was behind it. I think it became apparent that there was no particular terrestrial explanation, not that they were saying these are from space or anything, but it was an unexplained phenomenon, perhaps an unexplained natural phenomenon, electrical phenomenon of some sort, because they had experienced other odd effects occasionally in the air involving electrical systems being affected and all. Sometimes bombers were reported to pass over areas where their engines would sputter, certainly not go out, but have difficulty. Nope, we on the air. I'm hearing beeps.
I know. I think I'm back.
Oh, there you are.
We'll see how long this, remains to be seen. They've been doing.
Well, that didn't last long.
Well, anyway, that's essentially what Foo Fighters are. And it's been a persistent mystery over the years. And when documents began to become available through the Freedom of Information Act, many of us tried to file on that topic among the later topics involving flying saucers and to see what we could find. And we were persistently denied that there were any records on this subject, which I found ludicrous, but I had to prove to them that there was some kind of paperwork trail on the subject. So beginning around 1992, I paid a visit to the National Archives in D.C. and began to mine the paperwork, see what I could locate. And it was a long weekend, and I was working on box after box without finding much in the way of results until towards the end of the last day. I was desperate to get some results, so I ordered a World War II box involving, among others, night fighter missions over France and Germany. And when I started plumbing one particular 2-foot-long box, I located several pages of mission reports where they allude to these strange orange balls being seen. And at one point, one of the documents actually used the term Foo Fighters. So I was been told earlier that name didn't exist in government files, and there it was, lo and behold. All one had to do was go to these places and dig through the records themselves. I'm sure, even under the Freedom of Information Act, that thorough searches weren't being performed by the government people. And, they had personnel issues, the short staffs and all. They weren't expected to go through every last page of every box they had, but at the same time, the searches were just not going to be 100%. So we had to do it ourselves, and that's how you find things. Lo and behold, we finally found the first hard evidence of Foo Fighters in government records. They were also known by other terms, too, Kraut fireballs, orange orbs, a variety of terms. And it's quite a remarkable thing.
So with all of everything that you have done with regard to the Foo Fighters, which to me is something that is incredibly important because it's phenomena that we're still seeing today. When I went over to Heshdal in Norway, I believe this is the anomalous light phenomenon. It's the same type of thing. And so, just continue to tell us about how this evolved and how Keith Chester got involved.
Yeah. Well, we did our own searching at times, but we couldn't stay down there. And I'm about 500 miles from D.C. Jan is a little closer, but not by much. And we simply couldn't camp out the way we needed to do to be able to do a more thorough search of documents. What we needed was someone that could be in the area and regularly go there every week or so, or even more frequently if possible, and comb through the records. Someone that didn't have a regular employment. They had to show up 9 to 5. Someone that had freedom to go and look. So in the late 90s, we had been contacted by a fellow named Keith Chester. And he was very interested in government document research. He wanted to do something to locate paperwork. And he lived nearby to the National Archives. So he was able to commute back and forth. And Jan and I had loaded him up with leads, places to look. The government papers are divided into records groups at the archives, and each records group has literally millions of pages of assorted paperwork to go through. Some of it was broken down in the inventories, but you just couldn't pinpoint anything individually. So Keith offered to do that. And he spent the next 10 years visiting the archives occasionally once a month or so. That's as frequently as he could get there. Was far better than we could. So in that time, he was able to really locate a ton of information in bombing mission reports, reports about secret weapons research going on, night fighter squadrons. It was just amazing the number of things he was able to find. I did an inventory after Keith had finished his book and had passed along his records because he was engaged in other research on World War II. He wanted to move his Foo Fighter work along. He sent it to me, and I broke it down into an Excel spreadsheet. And there's roughly 1,300 items in the spreadsheet describing all manner of records of these things being seen. And also, as supplementary material, there were descriptions of peculiar anti-aircraft weaponry that was being thrown up by the Axis and by Japan. And occasionally that would leak into the press. You'd see little obscure references to strange silver balls and odd aircraft being seen by the Allies. A lot of that was assumed to be jets, but jet aircraft were only at their very beginnings at that time. And it certainly couldn't explain all the reports, especially ones where extraordinary maneuvering, they couldn't hang U-turns on a dime, which is what was described with Foo Fighter reports often. So when Keith passed that along, I did that breakdown, and I was amazed at how much there was. We filled 3 banker's boxes with those old records, and now they're very findable and very usable. We just need the time to be able to sit down and scan it all into an electronic form so people can use it regularly.
And I have to say, I mean, just to know both of you and to know, I mean, every single day you are spending the whole day obtaining archives, scanning them, getting them into, chronological order, getting them out there to people. And I don't think there's anybody that I've met in this subject who has as much perseverance and fortitude as both of you. It's absolutely amazing to me. And Keith went down there for 10 years, once a month. I mean, these are pretty impressive things. And I think most people who get into this subject now don't understand how difficult of a subject it is, how much money you have to spend, how much of your life you have to give to this. And it's really important to understand the contributions that have been made.
Yeah, well, I mean, we advised Keith on where to look and what to look for, but Keith did the legwork on that, and he's the one that really deserves the credit for unearthing all this massive information. He did document it in a book called Strange Company, which he wrote. That's back in 2008, I believe. And it was a pretty good assessment of what was found at the time, and we're always looking to enhance that with new research. And now that digital scanning has taken hold with just about everyone, we're hoping that a lot of this old paperwork will be available through the National Archives website, amongst others, so that we can continue without having to be present down there. So it's a bright future in terms of getting more information on this.
It is. And I think it's fun that we've got now a younger generation coming into this. And I've actually did have one person reach out to me and say, I live 30 miles away from Barry. Is there a way that I can get in contact with him and help him do some things? And so I think the more we talk about this and get it out there that you need help, and it's important to all of us.
Yeah, the
really
problem...
cool
problem with UFO researchers is they're too widely scattered. There are people all over the world, but they tend to be distant from one another. And occasionally there are local groups that work together and all. But I think long-term, really persistent people over a great deal of time, they're hard to find. Everyday life is busy, and people have to work and take care of their house and family and do their jobs. And this kind of research tends to be spare time. And if you retire, you can spend a little more time on it, like I was able to do. But it's not something you can get regular, heavy help on. So we have to call out and see who's out there that's willing to do that.
So do you think that that's changed over the years? I mean, back in the 60s, it seems that there were a lot more people that were apt to volunteer.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think the subject was in the media more in the 50s and 60s, especially in the mid-60s. I think it hit a high point of numbers of people being involved between 1965 and 67, where you had organizations that could coordinate activities, and NICAP, for example, one of the big groups at the time, had well over 10,000 members, and they would regularly submit clippings and sighting reports and other information to the headquarters, where they're able to process it and inform the public. And now it's not exactly the same. You have electronic communication instead of newsletters and magazines. So I think the flow of information can be larger and quicker, but that depends upon the subject being active. And I would say, in general, we don't hear about it so much in the media we used to hear about it in, but the internet seems to be chock-a-block with sighting reports.
And also people that have kind of commandeered the field that are either completely insane or are trying to capitalize on the subject.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't help. It hinders work, because the sillier people become, the harder it is seriously, because you're lumped in with everybody else. And I think the subject is very political in a way, much like real politics is. You have your left wing, your right wing, your middle, and an extreme spectrum of opinion back and forth. And because the subject tends to be rather sensational, the weirdness of it is emphasized more by the media, and the serious aspects of it are sidelined, marginalized. So it doesn't get across as much to people that, there are people in the trenches that are trying to dig out serious data on it. And it's hard to make that point that this is really important, again, because there's so much noise coming from so many sources. You get drowned out in the din.
And so I have to ask you, and I know we want to talk a little bit more about Foo Fighters. I know Jan has a lot to share with regard to this, but with the United States, it seems that this is a very special place, and because of what the government has chosen to do for decade after decade, with like Dr. James McDonald, I mean, people who were trying to do the right thing and really research. Do you feel that the United States, is there ever hope here to get kind of a clear water and to get good research done, or do you think it's just too muddied?
Good research is being done, but again, you have to look hard for it. The people who do that kind of research tend to do it quietly. They don't like the sensation and the craziness associated with it, so they stay within a very limited circle of people and communicate with one another. And some of them are almost afraid to go public because you don't want to be associated with that. You have a regular job and you do this as a after hours thing, and you go on the media and talk about it. Often the media will dress up the appearance with silly music and foolish comments, and that tends to stick to whoever they have on, no matter how serious they are. So it drives people away who have something practical to say about the whole thing. And it's not a good thing, but that's the way it is.
Do you think that that's unique to the United States?
No, it probably is worldwide. There may be some countries where it's more acceptable. I think historically, South America, even up to government ranks, does take the subject more seriously. They openly express belief in the phenomenon as possibly being extraterrestrial, and you can find all sorts of evidence of that in historical literature. But some governments take it more seriously than others. U.S. is very, they think, right-wing that way. They're very conservative, and they don't acknowledge much value to the phenomenon.
But that's interesting. Now you see with the Tom DeLonge and To the Stars Academy, and as you know through your decades of research, that people have taken this very, very seriously.
Yeah. Well, Jan can tell you a few things about that too.
Well, Jan, what do you have to say?
Well, I say that pretty much high culture in America has decided that there's nothing to UFOs. So it's left to popular culture, and that's where you get all, like he says, you get the weird music and the funny comments about people that are interested, and the people, and a lot of the people in the field the intelligent ones have been driven out by some of the more silliness going on. We've got to cut you off right there because I can hear that music. And when I talk about this is a really important topic, I'm Erica Lukes here with Barry Greenwood and Jan Aldrich. We will be right back.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified
with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Paranormal radio never sounded so good. Join the hosts of the American Ghost Hunter Show each week as they shoot from the hip without holding back.
They're kind of unpredictable, not like the rest of us.
Live every Thursday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Right here on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Come hear some of the hottest authors, investigators, as well as TV and radio personalities from around the world on the American Ghost Hunter Show.
Our survival depends upon it.
Hauntings, UFOs, cryptos. If it's branded paranormal, we'll be talking about it. The American Ghost Hunter Show. Live Thursday nights, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The only question you have to ask yourself, are you ready for it?
Yeah! All right!
Hi, Vancouver. George Norrie here, inviting you to join me and producer Tom Danheiser on June 30th at the 4th Annual Architects of the New Paradigm Conference. This will be a groundbreaking, jam-packed event featuring Stephen Bassett, Grant Cameron, Richard Dolan, Daniel Sheehan, Johnny Enoch, and Victor Vigiani. You don't want to miss this one, so watch the 3-minute video and get tickets at anpconference.com. That's anpconference.com. anpconference.com.
Great. The all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Great. Please make a note of it. It's great.
If ever a breed was affectionate to a fault, it's the Golden Retriever. They're people dogs, pure and simple. And the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada needs your help. If you would like to volunteer, foster, adopt, or donate, go to the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada's website at grrsn.org. That's grrsn.org. Or call 598-GOLD. That's 598-GOLD.
Monday nights are about to become hauntingly good as Reverend Sean Whittington possesses the airwaves with Vegas Supernatural. Tune in every Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern for Vegas Supernatural, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. There's a war raging between good and evil. The question is, which side are you fighting on? Tune in Monday nights as Reverend Sean Whittington sets the new standard for paranormal radio with some of the most influential personalities in the world today. Vegas Supernatural, hosted by Reverend Sean Whittington. Every Monday night at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The one show even the devil doesn't want you to hear.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back, and thank you for hanging in there on a very exciting night with my internet. I would love to tell you that I had, the men in black at my door and there was something mysterious going on, but alas, nope, it was just an incompetent internet company. But on that note, I am back with two people that I look up to, two people that have been kind enough to mentor the new kid on the block, to give me good information and to help me really move forward in a positive way. I'm here with Jen Aldrich, who is a longtime UFO researcher who specializes in UFO history and government, UFO involvement. He is head of Project 1947. He has been on the show, and we have talked about many amazing things. And also Barry Greenwood, who wrote a book that I have in my hands called Clear Intent. He co-authored this with Larry Fawcett, and this really is a book. It's out of print now, but I suggest that you get on Amazon, try to find it, because if you get one book in your library, Clear Intent ebook, and if you watch Repo Man, you can actually see one of the characters holding Clear Intent, which I think is really cool. But welcome back, both of you, and thanks for putting up with all of the interference.
Well, it's not bothering on this end. It's more on your end, I think.
Well, that's good. It sounds like you guys can, carry on without me, which is awesome.
Okay, we'll take over.
Thank you. Well, and I think that you guys are pretty good at that. And I have to ask you, because when we went to break, we were talking about how, the culture, the high culture in America has really kind of pushed this subject aside and pop culture has taken over. And Jen, you were right in the middle of saying something, so please continue.
Well, I just think that pop culture is mostly driven by monetary considerations. So you have to have the lowest common denominator whenever you're talking about things. So you find that if you appear on a TV show, you may be edited to make yourself look really funny. So it's like I say, it's the lowest common denominator, and it's I think comics they want to do the easiest way to get a lot of people to laugh at something. They say it just falls in your lap. Well, that's the way we're presented on TV shows and stuff, like we're real gullible people.
Yeah, to echo what Jan is saying, I recall a survey that was done in TV Guide back in the late 70s, where they were trying to figure out what are the top topics that draw ratings. And their conclusion then had been, number one, sex, and number two, UFOs. And you combine the both, as in abduction reports, you've got a winner, you've got a home run. That dominated the talk in the subject throughout much of the 80s and the 90s. And it did draw ratings. But as everything, it gets milked out over time, and they're looking for something new to talk about. So UFOs have kind of slipped back on the meter a little bit, replaced by other things.
So with, regard to Tom DeLonge and To the Stars Academy, I mean, at first it seemed like there was a great hope that this subject finally was being taken seriously in the media, and we were going to see great revelations. What do you think is happening with that now, and how are you feeling frustrated?
Jan has better remarks about that than I do.
I think that they approached this with no plan. Now, NICAP had a plan. They put out the UFO evidence, and they approached Congress at the same time. And they kept ammunition in reserve. Everything was not in the UFO evidence. When congressmen told them that they were interested or amazed at what was in the UFO evidence, Keogh could tell them, "Oh, we have more, and we have people that want to come forward, but they have to be treated respectfully. But if there's a congressional hearing, these people will come forward." So they had people in reserve to come forward. I think I mentioned several times some of Keogh's hidden reports. Some of the people that had submitted reports said, "Well, if there's ever a congressional hearing, I will be willing to come forward." So they had a reserve, and I think that more or less this has been. I think they've pretty well shot their load with the New York Times. There's nothing left to do. Leslie Keaton said, "Well, we have nothing more because the Times can't vet anything else we have." So
So what do you think about the videos that they're releasing? Because it seems like, and I keep hearing through different channels that they've got more and they're going to be releasing more. And, do you think there's any?
Well, you got to press on. I mean, you just can't have a lot of silence. You got to keep the pressure on. I think because they've had the sighting over the West Coast and the one in Arizona, those have sort of kept UFOs in the news. And while I'm not sure what these pilots saw, it sure is interesting. And so it really has kept it up, but there's nothing that To the Stars did. It's just things coming out. Now, in the 50s and 60s, when serious people would come out and say something about it, all of a sudden, a lot of people and a lot of reporters would go out and find people and talk to them, and so there was more seriousness, serious people coming forward, and you had something that kept going instead of going in fits and starts, which I think is the problem here.
And it is interesting that you say that. When the DeLonge thing, the New York Times story broke, I actually called all of my local media and said, here are my credentials. I would love to do an interview for you to tell you about good research that is being done. And of course, none of it back to me. And then they all ran just really pathetic stories. And so it's too bad. In my mind, it's too bad that DeLonge and his organization didn't reach out to people like you and the real researchers and then incorporate that and then have like a bigger target instead of just, and I've heard Tom DeLonge say this or other people for him that he's being targeted and we should be nice as the UFO community and things like that. Well, great. It is great that they're doing that, but they should also, I think, respect the people who have done a lot of work. And if they were smart, they would utilize all of you.
Yeah, I think what they failed to see is that a lot of the UFO community, the serious people, have learned lessons from the past, from presentations like that had a great deal of promise, but eventually rang hollow because either the best stuff was fired first or there wasn't a great backup to information that was pretty interesting. And that's happened here where back in December with the release of the New York Times article, you were promised that the subject was both real and declassified. And you saw a couple of videos released, which are interesting, but we didn't get a lot about the video documentation that existed in association with the films that were released. And then more recently, we've seen a third video come out showing a dot projected against the ocean moving quite quickly and all. But once again, we don't have the accompanying report to go with that. There must have been some analysis of that film by the AATIP and their later versions, but where is it? We were also told about a 490-page history book that existed that they had compiled. So far, no sign of that. And also reams of data that existed with this organization. We have yet to see that too. And as of now, we don't see any real projection as to when that might appear. Although it was mentioned before that they had perhaps 24 videos that were going to come out, but we don't have the schedule of when any of this is going to happen. So I think people are waiting for another shoe to drop, and it's not dropping. So that engenders frustration. You're hungry now for information on something pretty sensational, and you're only getting it in crumbs. And what gives?
And so I have to ask, when you look at the people that are on the board, I mean, Chris Mellon, what information do you have or any interactions with him specifically?
I'm not sure how far back he goes in the subject. When he originally contacted researchers about doing something substantive with the subject, his presentation was see if you can find anything contemporary, something new, a military case that happened within weeks or months or maybe even a short number of years. And contacting us for that, we're historians. We don't have those kinds of sources. We deal with decades-old things. And, well, there were people in the past that used to tell us about contemporary things. That's not really our focus. We don't have sources within the military relaying new information about sighting reports. It is the matter of security, for one thing. You talk about a fighter jet taking off from an aircraft carrier and seeing something strange. People on that carrier don't immediately call Jan Aldrich or Barry Greenwood about it. It stays within their circles and eventually might get out through some means. But we don't hear information like that. So I think Mellon had to depend upon more internal sources, people that he knew inside the government. He was a government employee, so he had better contacts. And that is apparent in the releases in October and December of last year. And we'd expected more out of that. But, still waiting.
And it is interesting that he reached out, though, to you and asked for information when, like you say, he should have these inside sources. And I think it is also interesting, too, and I want to ask you what you think about Luis Elizondo and some of his public statements that he has made. It seems like every time you see an interview with him, he is talking about the threat. He talks a lot about a story, or he recounts, just saying if you saw wet footprints on your carpet, wouldn't you feel like this was a threat? And to me, to use the word threat is, I don't know if there's an agenda there or what the ultimate goal is, but how do you both of you feel about that?
Well, I perceive when someone in the military talks about threat, I think they mean more something unknown, not necessarily a physical violent threat, but just something we can't explain. We don't know what constitutes the phenomenon being displayed. So I think in general, humans tend to fear the unknown first and then think about it later on. So in the military especially, everything unknown or unexplained can be perceived as a threat, and they react that way. In this case, you have fast reaction aircraft going after strange objects. In the cases of the videos released by them, some of it was just happenstance. Something occurred while the aircraft are up in training mission, and there it is. They were able to catch film and all. But in general, they're going to see anything like that as a threat. I just don't infer any negative or evil intent behind it. It's just something that they have to assess over time. And, we're all concerned. They're telling us that these things happen, and they're assuring us these things happen. Elizondo seems credible. His background was verified in a number of sources. Political, the website affirmed that from the Pentagon that Elizondo was in charge of that group for the time period he was there. And so that's assured. But at the same time, the documentation that he presented verifying that was only presented to, I believe, the newspapers, no one else outside of that group of people. So we're taking him on their word on that. But that's why more enhancement of this information is needed to further bolster that position.
And it's interesting because I've heard different statements, again, I'm sure you have as well, that they're not really catering to the UFO community, that this is all about increasing public awareness.
Right, yeah.
Like
the UFO community is, I think, way down the list of ones to be concerned about. It's more important to get the public interested, and especially in what they're doing, contributing funding to their effort. Last I saw, their website had something like $2 million in donations from individuals, and they're seeking to apply that to whatever plans they have in developing exotic aircraft and investigating the phenomenon. We just don't know precisely how it's going to go that way. There's no clear explanation of it. So we're waiting to see more.
Jan, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are it's great to have stuff that's the latest, and you can talk to people right now that were involved. But if you look at the Navy cat on my website, the same thing's been happening all the way back to the Second World War. This is nothing new. Now, the technology to work with detection is better. I'll grant that. But this stuff has been going on for a long time, and it's about the same thing over and over again. So, to me, I'm just as interested as something that happened in 1947 as I am something that happened last week. When we start looking back at what's going on here, it appears that after Blue Book closed, there was there was still interest within the government for a while, anyways. As I mentioned, Hynek had a contract with the Air Force after Blue Book closed. We don't know what it is. Robert Todd was submitting a lot of FOIAs to naval intelligence and getting very little back. The Navy's always been a hard nut to crack. But he finally asked the FOIA officer he was dealing with, you've been interested in this for years. It's shown that you investigate it, and you're still looking into reports. What exactly is happening? Well, FOIA officer has absolutely. They don't have to answer that kind of question. If you can tell them where the document is, they might be able to call it forward for you. But they don't have to answer questions about the policies or anything like that. But Todd was good at getting people to answer his questions, and this fellow said, naval intelligence has no interest in UFOs. The only reason we're investigating right now, this is after Blue Book closed, is because the Air Force still wants the reports. So we send them the reports. That's very interesting. It's just little hints on the outside. So at least until about 1975, they appear to be still interested in this. Hynek's contract was terminated just before he started CUFOS. I think maybe that's why he started CUFOS, because he was upset about the government finally terminating everything about UFOs. So I think we have material to find behind the scenes from all eras. And intelligence people being who they are, I would think that the ATT would have gone ahead and found prior investigations and looked at them.
And so I have to go back to 1975, when the people were still interested in then Hynek's contract being terminated and all of the things that happened back in that era. Do you think that the general consensus was these things were not credible, or was there some sort of religious bent to why the funding got shut down or this got poo-pooed?
Oh, it was shut down in 1970 with the end of Blue Book, but Hynek's involvement after that under his contract was very unclear. He stayed in touch with a colonel who was a regular contact for him in investigating reports, Colonel Weinberger. And there was some idea that about the time that Allen seemed to have a meltdown about his duty at Wright-Patterson, shortly afterwards he created the Center for UFO Studies. Whether his meltdown as to what was going on within the Air Force was relevant to UFOs, it seemed like an awful coincidence that he decided to do his own organization immediately afterwards. It may have been that he was very unhappy with what the Air Force was doing in keeping him on and having him perhaps still occasionally consult on the phenomenon, and they were eternally cutting the budget, cutting funding for doing that. So it comes to a point where you realize you can't do any more with what's being provided, so you just go off on your own. And that seems to be what he had done back then.
Oh, I mean, what an interesting time. And you lived through that. I'm excited to talk more on our second half, but we've got to take a break. I'm Erica Lukes here with Jen Aldrich and Barry Greenwood. Get your questions ready. We will answer them, and we will be back.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at UFOclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
Now, broadcasting in digital HD radio.
The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the second half of UFO Classified. I'm always happy to spend a Friday evening with you and to see new people in chat and to know that even after the show airs, that there are many other people who are downloading it and listening to it. This is why I'm here. I'm here for you, and I want to increase awareness, as do my two guests tonight, who have spent their entire adult lives really researching the topic of UFOs and the government and their knowledge of this. They've been doing FOIA requests. They've been busy collecting archives from researchers that have passed on and trying to scan them, restore them, get them out there for the younger generation to learn from. And I think that is it's an amazing thing for me as somebody who's relatively new in the field to have the opportunity to learn from people like this. It means a lot. And so I encourage all of you to go to project1947.com to learn about what Jan Aldrich has done, and then also visit Barry Greenwood at greenwoodufoarchives.com and to learn. I mean, it just, Barry, I have to say, both of your archives and everything that you put forth is so amazing.
It took a long time. And it's still overwhelming me. I'm trying to process it as quickly as I can, but it seems like more comes in than I can prepare properly. So I need a staff. I don't have a staff. That's true of Jan as well, and just about everyone else who works a lot in the subject.
Well, I can't believe what both of you have done. You truly are my heroes, and so anything, and if I put this out here to some of my listeners, please, get information out about what they have done and go study and learn real historical facts. And then if any of you can get into your area and find out about people that are giving up their archives, get in there, find those archives, scan them, get them out to the public, just do what Barry and Jan have done their whole life. It's crucial. When we went to break, we were talking about, Weinberger. We were talking about the time that Hynek had his meltdown and all of these things. But then on break, we were mentioning the hidden documents, and I want to go into that a little bit. So take it away.
Well, hidden documents. One of my favorite stories is something that Donald Kehoe had discussed in his. I think it was his fourth book in 1960. Flying Saucers Top Secret. And I tried to do something with this story multiple times, especially when I had visited CUFOS, which incorporates the old NICAP files. In January 1958, Kehoe had appeared on a TV show called the Armstrong Circle Theater. And it was an hour-long presentation on the subject, pro and con. The Air Force was involved, and they had intended on having famous UFO witness names on, like Kenneth Arnold and a number of other folks. And one by one, they kept dropping out before the program was set in stone. And Kehoe asked about it, and he discovered that the Air Force seemed to have sway over the content of the show, that they were allowed to censor the script to their liking. And Kehoe was urged to drop out of the program, as it's pointless if he's going to have his script altered. So he said, no, better stick with it, because you don't often get much of a chance to go on national television. So he gave his presentation, and it was scripted. There is a printed copy of the script out there showing what he was going to do, and he followed it to the letter, except he became rather frustrated, and towards the end, he decided to insert something that wasn't in the script. So when he began to diverge the audio on the program, the national audio going out to everyone, to a whisper. Some people said they could hear what he said, but most people just lost the audio on that. And it turned into a big brouhaha in the media the next day. Kehoe censored what did he say and all. What he actually said was he was announcing that a congressional subcommittee was going to look into the subject. But even that much information the Air Force didn't want out, and the producer had to eliminate the audio because he had been told that they got to follow the script. And that one act by Kehoe put an exclamation point on censorship. Now, during that same month, I'm not sure if it was just before or after, Kehoe said he received a letter from a closed-circuit TV or radio station at Lackland Air Force Base near San Antonio. And it was a request from the program director for station KLRH, which covered essentially within the base, initially the base hospital, but they would tape programming and give it to the rest of the base later. And this producer, Ballsy, wanted to use quotes from Kehoe's third book, Flying Saucer Conspiracy, to use on a closed-circuit program. Now, this was an Air Force base, so the hospital and all that's official Air Force. And it was labeled a formal request. So the next day, Kehoe had noticed a piece in the San Antonio paper by a Major Warren Aiken, who was the chief of education planning. And he was very, very positive about maybe some of these were from space. And, you know, it for Kehoe's interest, what's going on here? He gets a request from a radio station at the base, and then this major gives very positive statements about UFOs. So Kehoe answered back, and he didn't get an answer. So a few months go by, and Ballsy sent Kehoe a response as to what was going on, saying the station was being revamped. But the script of the program was titled Look to the Skies, would be produced, and it would be aired. And he had sent along to NICAP a 17-page script with the remarkable content. It included classic cases, like there was one in 1953 called the Kinross story, involving aircraft that was sent to investigate a UFO, and the aircraft had merged with a the image of the UFO on a radar scope, and aircraft disappeared, vanished. As far as I know, it still hasn't been found.
Oh
but
my gosh.
It was a classic story, and I think it was November '53. That was included in the script. Again, remarkable for the Air Force to do this. Their whole purpose had been, up to that time, don't emphasize the mystery, just debunk it all, get rid of it, especially in 1958. But they said that the base public information officer would be on, a Lieutenant Wyckoff, and he'd be giving the Air Force position, but at the same time, they'd say, well, what about this, what about that, and so on. So it was a remarkably even-handed program. And Kehoe and Dick Hall, who was the assistant director of NICAP, they were stunned by the script. The script was labeled with a date, March 2nd, which implied that the program had already aired, but they think that was just the intended date and it had been put off somewhat. And they were still going to give approval for it. But when Kehoe sent his approval, he didn't get an answer for months. And he followed up with a registered letter in June of that year. Now, that's 5 months later. The program director, and I quote this, it's not long, rehearsals were begun several times, but due to reductions in personnel, I was repeatedly forced to postpone the broadcast. At last, the hospital executive officer, Colonel Kenneth B. Johnson, closed the radio station altogether. The few remaining personnel were reassigned. Lieutenant Wyckoff, the PIO, who was asked to appear on the program, was transferred to another base. KLRH is being dismantled. So, it had all the appearances of their intent being to present a good presentation on UFOs, and then someone else hears about it higher up and slams the door shut, and that's the end of it. I had checked at Kufos when I made several trips in the past and even last year, trying to find that script and the associated paperwork, the letters and all. Kehoe indicated that he had copies of it all. I looked, no sign of it. It was all gone. And that may have been due to the fact that Kehoe had some of his paperwork, perhaps what he considered more important things, in his private office where he lived in Luray, Virginia. It wasn't at NICAP. And those files have largely vanished. We don't know what happened to them. So that's one of my favorite hidden document stories. Where's that script?
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible.
That's almost like the estimate of the situation where they had a private assessment of UFOs being interplanetary. In that case, in 1948, here you have an officially sanctioned script that essentially concluded the same thing, but then that vanishes as well. But not by the Air Force. He may be accused of mishandling that and not making sure extra copies survived. But right. That would be a cool thing to see.
That would be, and I think about when both of you were looking through all of this and trying to get these little bits and pieces of information, how both rewarding and frustrating this pursuit has been.
Yeah, sometimes you feel like you're batting your head against the wall, getting nowhere, but sometimes you have little victories here and there, and we look forward to revelations coming out in the future. Then we might uncover some more hidden paperwork, and you just have to find exactly where it is.
It's so cool. I love this. I love this. And so, Jan, I know that you wanted to talk about, we want to go back to Foo Fighters and talk a little bit about Joe Chamberlain.
Okay. Joe Chamberlain, in December 1945, an article appeared in American Legion magazine, and it was by Joe Chamberlain, and he wrote about the 415 and other sightings in the Pacific and Europe. And UFO people were not. They didn't remember this, or it didn't register with them, and until about 1954, a fellow in England found the article, and then he started quoting it, and he became the expert on Foo Fighters because he was quoting Chamberlain. Years later, about the time Barry's looking for his material, we had two people, one in England, Andy Roberts. He was looking through official documents there in England. And Jeff Lindell, he was a veteran, and he was studying. He was going to college, and he got his degree in folklore. And so he, for 4 years, he zeroed in on Foo Fighters. He went and interviewed people. He got the confidence of old fighter pilots and bomber pilots and even generals, and he interviewed them on this. So he asked Joe Chamberlain if he had the documents that he used for the article, because it's obvious that he used official documents. And Joe Chamberlain said, "Oh, I was a magazine writer, and I asked a Air Force adjutant for documents, and he sent them to me, and I used them in my article, and then the Counterintelligence Corps came and questioned me, and they were very angry with me, and I put them in the basement, and I have never seen them since then." Okay, Joe Chamberlain had a stroke, and Jeff asked me if I would approach his wife about the documents that were in the basement. And so I called his wife, and she pretty well brushed me off. Of course, she says, "Well, my husband's had a stroke. What do you?" So I said, "Well, is it possible that we could get those documents?" And, "Oh, yes, maybe. These are all lies." So I have to go back before Joe Chamberlain, but General Hap Arnold was the commander of the Army Air Forces. He would become a 5-star general. About 1943, there were some incidents in Germany of bomber pilots, and the most famous one, I think, is in October of 43, and the target of the bombing was a terrible battle. Lots of casualties, lots of planes shot down, people wounded, killed. One barracks, the guy said he was sick, so he didn't go on the bombing run, and they had like enlisted people from 5 or 6 bombers that went out, and when they came back, nobody came back. He had the whole barracks to himself, and it just made him go crazy. Anyways, they said they encountered these small discs coming down, silver discs, and they went past the aircraft, and one aircraft pilot said that they hit the aircraft. Martin Caden wrote a book about this. He was an aviation writer, but he's known to be pretty sensational. So a lot of people didn't believe it. He wrote about this thing. So this went on in UFO lore in the 50s, and then there was some story that, well, one of the discs hit a plane and set it on fire. And so this is outside the government what's known. And of course, people are saying, "Oh, these are small discs. These are some kind of a variety of UFOs or some kind of small UFOs." Finding some of General Arnold's papers, and we don't have all of them yet. Schweinfurt was not the place where the aircraft was set on fire. That was in Stuttgart about a month earlier in September. But the two incidents had been, the rumors of the two incidents had been welded together into a story. The commander in Europe of the 8th Air Force was a man named Eckert. His initials are ICE, so some people called him General ICE. But he had the job of commanding the 8th Air Force, and they were taking terrible hits and lots of casualties and lots of aircraft being shot down. And then he had this incident at Stuttgart about the small disc hitting a plane and setting it on fire, and he sent a message back to General Arnold about it. General Arnold and he communicated back and forth, and they were really worried about this. They said, we're having enough trouble bombing as it is, and these things look like they could break up our formations. It's just another way of attacking our aircraft, and it looks like it's very effective, and it might be really important. Arnold wrote to the chief scientist in the government at the time, Vannevar Bush, and expressed his feelings about how vital it was to counteract this. And he also wrote to General Marshall. Bush kind of brushed him off. Bush said, "Listen, there's 5 or 6 other things that can be done against bomber formations." And the Germans are developing anti-aircraft rockets that are very effective and other things. He said, I wouldn't worry about this. Arnold was, of course, very worried about this. The small discs seemed to go away for a while. But Arnold's concern with anything that was in the skies didn't seem to go away. So when the Foo Fighters came out, he asked the Air Force's chief scientist in Europe, Dr. David Griggs, to look into Foo Fighters. But he also had a special aide that wrote his speeches and did all sorts of other things, like do magazine articles or go out when they were testing new equipment, and he would write his impressions for the public of this new equipment. I think he got one of these rubber rafts that was deployed from an aircraft. They were testing it, and Chamberlain was in the rubber raft, and he wrote his impression, and the sea was rather choppy, and he had some rather bad impression of that.
And I'm going to have to cut you off right there. We'll talk about that because I can hear the music and we're going to break. So I will continue. I'm Erica Lukes. I'm here with Jen Aldrich and Barry Greenwood. We will be back for our last segment.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. 9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
With Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Alien Deceptions, a suspenseful sci-fi romance thriller by Tina Marie, featuring the tantalizing Erica Jones and the mysterious Russell Hamilton. An out-of-this-world book of fiction based on years of document facts and files the government does not want you to know about. At least, not yet. Alien Deceptions by Tina Marie. Available now at Amazon.com or get a signed copy at TinaMarieEntertainment.com. Get your copy now.
Here's what happened on the last episode of Three Guys, No Ties.
This guy broke into the police station. He had left something rather unpleasant, by the way, for the officers to find.
His Grammy?
Well.
Poo.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm right?
What a crappy statement.
She said poo. Yes, that's what it is.
You're the cleanest show
It doesn't
on radio.
matter how old you are, the word poo just
it's a great word.
makes you laugh.
Three Guys, No Ties. Wednesday nights, 7 to 9 Pacific on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
This is the world-famous KCOR.
That's the only station I listen to.
Thursday nights are about to get weird on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Join hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz as they go exploring the bizarre. Jet across the cosmos with two of the most electrifying paranormal researchers in the known universe. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. Exploring the bizarre takes you deep within the world of the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology. It's time to take back the night with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. Exploring the bizarre. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. Only on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific. Jump onto the Celestial Highway and travel at the speed of light. Into hyperspace. Hyperspace. Hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. She navigates you through the cosmic tides of mysticism into the world of covert technology, UFOs, mystical sciences, and the world of unforeseen forces.
You get to really sort of enjoy a bizarre ride.
Listen live, Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, for Hyperspace, the one show that blows the whistle off our government black ops projects. Hyperspace, hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Want to take a ride?
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts!
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back and happy Fantopia Friday. I want to give a shout out to Tina Marie, who is an excellent producer and a great station manager. I'm very proud to be on this network. Tina always is so respectful, as are all of my listeners. I really appreciate how thoughtful and dedicated you are, and it means the world to me. I know when I look at you and I see the way you're interacting in chat or the way we talk on social media or have conversations, and to see how respectful you are, that gives me great hope that we can do important things and really steer this subject that is the most important subject in the world in a good direction. I am here tonight with two people that I look up to that are mentoring me and that have so much experience. They preserve history. They care about the subject with regard to government secrecy and the games and all of these things. Aldrich and Barry Greenwood are here, and they have done extensive research. Please visit Barry's site at greenwoodufoarchive.com and project1947.com as well. I post links about both of those websites frequently, so please learn and get involved. When we left off, Jen, you were talking, so continue your story.
Okay, so Joe Chamberlain was a magazine writer, and he, I guess people don't know who Elliot Ness is today unless you've seen the movie about Elliot Ness and the Untouchables. Elliot Ness was a good friend of Joe Chamberlain. They wrote articles together about federal investigations of criminals and things like that. They were good friends. Chamberlain's brother worked with Elliot Ness. So during the war, Chamberlain was appointed a lieutenant colonel and a special aide to General Arnold, and he wrote his speeches and things like that. So the Foo Fighter thing started up in Europe. Arnold's special scientific advisor was asked to look into them, and he did produce a report, but we haven't been able to find it. But Joe Chamberlain was also involved. Now, he's a lieutenant colonel, and he went to Europe, and the war is still on in Europe. He's over there in March. He said he got to Europe. He said they gave him a Jeep, a driver, and a pistol, and told him he could go anywhere he wanted to. The first place he went was the 415th Night Fighter Squadron. These are the guys that had been seeing the Foo Fighters. And he interviewed the commander and all the pilots. He also found out an interesting thing while he was there. The Associated Press reporter, Bob Wilson, when the Foo Fighters first broke into the news in December 1944, Bob Wilson had done the same thing. He had lived with the pilots for 3 or 4 days talking about them. And Joe Chamberlain in his notes said, and there was another news person here that worked with the Stars and Stripes, Sergeant Ed Clark, and he scooped Bob Wilson on Christmas Eve. I didn't understand what that meant. I thought what Chamberlain meant was that Ed Clark wrote about the Foo Fighters on Christmas Eve. And so we're starting to look through. I asked Barry to look through the Stars and Stripes. He couldn't find anything. Later on, I found an article that Ed Clark did after he was out of the military, and he said he went up on Christmas Eve in one of the intruder missions, which these guys from the 415th, they went behind the lines and they looked for targets of opportunity at night. They were night fighters, and so Clark went up with them, and on Christmas Eve, he saw a Foo Fighter. That's what Joe Chamberlain meant, that he scooped Bob Wilson. So both of these men, they got first-hand accounts from these people. So if you see Bob Wilson or Ed Clark, they're not writing from third hand. They're writing from the actual witnesses' point of view. Now, in some cases, their articles were censored at the time during the Second World War. But so if you see Bob Wilson's line on there, he's getting it right from the horse's mouth. He is not getting it from some public information officer. He's getting it right from the pilot's mouth. The same with Chamberlain. Of course, he stayed there and he got documents, and he went around and talked to other pilots, not only during the day, not only during the night, but during the day. He talked to the pilots that had seen these things during the day. It wasn't the only thing he did while he was over there in Europe, but it was one of the more interesting things. He talked to some displaced persons, and he met this Russian woman that he was really impressed with. She was displaced and captured by the Germans, taken to Germany, and then she was released, and then she was in the Allied sector while the war is still going on, and how she made a living and everything was fascinating to Chamberlain, so he wrote about her. He got back to the States, and he decided he would write an article. He got permission to write an article. Of course, he talked to General Arnold, because they always were in contact. He's an aide to General Arnold, so a lot of the things that you would expect, letters and stuff like that. No, they spoke together all the time, so you don't find this. So he started writing an article, and the security people told him, "We're going to look at your article. You cannot use your rank, and you cannot use your position. You just use your name as the author of the article. In other words, you don't say Joe Chamberlain, a lieutenant colonel, special aide to General Arnold. You don't put that in there. You just use your name." So, for years, we had no idea who Joe Chamberlain was, just that he was a magazine writer. No, he wasn't. And why did he lie about this to Jeff Lindell and his wife? Well, his wife was an Air Force. Chamberlain met his wife in the Air Force, and Chamberlain, he just thought that he shouldn't talk about that, and his wife was the same way. When I was in the Army, I used to tell people that, we're in Germany, and when they left, they had to have a security debriefing. I just tell them, forget everything you've seen here. If people ask you what you did in Germany, talk about Oktoberfest or some other event you went to, but don't talk about anything you did within the military. So I think that's what Chamberlain did.
That's interesting.
This was
how
Chamberlain had to rewrite his article twice. He sent a copy of his article to Major Augspurser, who was in charge of the 415th, so he could look at it. Major Augspurser said he didn't have any criticism of the article, and he said he's so happy that the men's story was being taken seriously. Now, we go forward to when Ed Ruppelt took over as Project Blue Book head. Well, one of the things he did is go down to the Pentagon, and he looked for UFO reports that had not made it to Wright Field. And he went to people who had previously worked on the UFO project, both down there and at Wright Field, and he asked them, "What do you have in your desk?" I mean, this guy was, like I said, he was a data gathering Superman, but he didn't have anything about Foo Fighters. And as I said in both those articles, Look and Life, he said he doesn't know anything about Foo Fighters. There's very little he knew about Foo Fighters. Well, I found the top secret history of the Air Force intelligence, in Washington, the headquarters, Air Force Intelligence. And one of the things, one small paragraph says that in 1952, about the time Ruppelt was down there, they had packed up everything from World War II and sent it to Maxwell Air Force Base. So it was either in packing crates, on its way to Maxwell, or being unpacked at Maxwell. That's why Ruppelt couldn't find any information about Foo Fighters.
Wow.
So that's now, 1953, January 1953, an archivist at Maxwell Air Force Base, where the records ended up, sent to General Stanford, who was the overall boss of Air Force Intelligence at the time, a Foo Fighter incident from the records. It happened at near Truk in the Pacific. B-24 bomber coming back from a bombing run was followed by two objects. One of them peeled off just before they got to Truk. The other one went in front of the aircraft and back of the aircraft, by the side of the aircraft. The aircraft, the pilot called radar and asked if there was an enemy up there with him, and the radar said, "We have nothing on the radar." And so Ruppelt finally got a hold of that, but that's in January of 1953. It's quite a bit later. General Stanford sent it to Blue Book. It's in Blue Book. It's one of the few Foo Fighter accounts that is in Blue Book. So a historian should be very interested in this whole thing here. The Schweinfurt I guess you could call them air bombs or aerial mines, knocking down aircraft. And then General Arnold's he was very interested afterwards as to anything that was in the air that might be a threat to his aircraft. So he deployed both Dr. Griggs and Joe Chamberlain to find out about this. Yeah, and it seems to me that this is just the surface of this whole thing that I've told you about. Now we've uncovered it. We're not academics, and we don't have resources or a lot of time to do this kind of thing. But an actual historian would seem that this is something that's been completely neglected about the Second World War, especially these small discs. One other thing about these small discs, I found just by looking through documents from Maxwell Air Force Base, a one-page document from the Office of Strategic Services. Now, they're the forerunner of the CIA, and they were doing all kinds of spying and espionage during the Second World War. The document said that the Germans apparently had the Swiss, a factory in Switzerland was making small explosive discs that would be set off at different levels or when they hit aircraft. So I think that's the answer to General Arnold's Stuttgart discs. But like I say, I'm an amateur historian, somebody with with real historical credentials and, of course, all the time in the world to do this kind of stuff should be working on this.
Well, and I have to say that you are one of the most important historians that I've ever met in my life, and I would dare say that most official historians would not have done the work that you've done. And I mean that. I mean, I cannot honestly believe what both you and Barry have accomplished, and Michael Swords, and there's so many people behind the scenes who have contributed to this area of study, and that's just really incredible. And I want to ask you too, because this is important to me, but how did both of you meet?
I think Jan approached me first.
Yeah, I did. I called him up because somebody had told me that he was interested in history, and I had before I went overseas in the Army. We had a group of people that were interested in early UFO history. I mean, pre-Arnold. And we did a round robin. We didn't have computers then. We just, somebody would find a clipping from, 1934 or something. And so we'd circulate it around to everybody else in the group. And as it went around, other people would add their stuff to it. So somebody mentioned Barry Greenwood, so I called him up, and he fopped me off,
Yeah. I thought he was a nut. I gave him enough leash to hang himself, but he didn't hang himself.
Oh.
He sent me stuff about 1909 in Massachusetts, and I told him, I said, "Gee, I have all this," and so we became. We came in close cooperation on different projects. I couldn't have done what I just told you about in the Foo Fighters if it hadn't been for Barry finding things that along the line that went into this story.
Tag team to be able to recover things in a timely fashion.
Just real fast. Out at the Hanford Atomic Works in Washington State during the Second World War, they were having aerial intrusions. And a commander, a naval commander, said that he was a pilot. His name was Hendershot. And he wrote a little letter to one of the UFO groups saying that in January, February 1945, he had heard about UFOs over Hanford at that era and had participated in some of the attempts to do that. Now that's just one little piece of evidence that we had. I went to the archives and I was able to find documents from 4th Air Force that confirmed what Hendershot had said. The 4th Air Force said, we need to have people up there at Hanford to be able to go up and intercept these things. So they and the Navy was up there. The Navy was up there. They were training replacement squadrons to go to the Pacific. So part of their training was to intercept things that showed up over Hanford. Now, I told that to Barry. Barry went and said, "Well, I'm going to look at the newspapers for 1945." Right after they dropped the Nagasaki, the bomb in Hiroshima and then Nagasaki, the head of the Hanford Works gave an interview to the press. In that interview, he said, yes, we had aerial intrusions during the Second World War here. Barry found that article. So we, like he said, we tag team this stuff. All that stuff is on my site if you go to look for Hanford there. And like I said, we work together on this.
And I love that. I mean, there's so much out there for everybody to read and to study. And I think that it's important for people to look back historically and understand the games that have been played, the disinformation, misinformation, all of these things, and then to look at people like you who have been relentless with FOIAs or kind of pushing the boundaries. And that's, we have to build upon that to make research, to push research forward. So I commend both of you. And I have to say to my listeners again, go to Greenwood, UFOarchive.com or project1947.com. And I want to ask both of you, when we're, just parting, I mean, would you, if you had to live your life over again, would you still do it this way?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Me too. I'm loving this. I've never had this much fun in my life.
There's an awful lot to be found still.
Yeah, it's a mystery, and we just scratched the surface. And all these people that tell you they know what's going on, they're crazy. They don't even know. We don't even know the beginning. We're just at the beginning of this thing.
Well, and you were mentioning on the break skeptics and people that are true believers and drinking the Kool-Aid. I mean, it runs the gamut. So it's. I think it's when you look at people's belief systems and things that you've got to push that aside and then look at the history and let all of this unfold into such a fascinating tale.
One wants to strike a sensible middle.
I'm a UFO skeptic, but I'm a real skeptic. I mean, I don't dismiss everything out of hand, but, Michael Sword says that Eddie Bullard doesn't believe anything, and Jan Aldrich believes one more thing than Eddie Bullard does.
But you're still doing it, so you must have hope that there's something out there.
I do think there's something out here, and I think it needs to be looked at.
Absolutely.
By some of the best people. We need 100 McDonald's looking at this subject.
It's probably a generational problem.
And we've got to close the show. Thank you so much, Jan Aldrich and Barry Greenwood, for being here. I will post links, as I always do, to Project 1947 and Barry Greenwood Archives. Thank you for being here. Have a wonderful night. Stick around for Willie Miranda, who will be up next. We'll catch you next week.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at UFOclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network.